Alright boys, so in today's video we're going to be talking about another one of the male servants going up on rate up right now on the NA version of the game for Summer 5, otherwise known as Summer Camp. And you guys may be hearing right now, your boy did get that mic fixed, courtesy of one viewer that was just absolutely tired of hearing the dog water quality, and they gave your boy a little bit of a helping hand. So we're back to not only regularly scheduled programming, but I think we're actually even better than the other mic was normally when I was back home. Still on vacation, but I'm able to put out what I think is actually pretty good audio at the very least. But enough of that. In today's video, we're here to talk about Emiya, and this is definitely a servant that I know a lot of people have their eyes on, and if you're going to be summoning on this banner, it's definitely for Emiya in particular. While Sigurd is kind of cool to have for lore reasons, and Lan Ling is certainly fun to use as kind of like an alternative art support type servant, Emiya is definitely the prize here, because you guys may or may not have realized during the anniversary, I only made like a whole video on it, but Emiya got himself a really insanely powerful buff during the anniversary, and alongside his kit that was already strong enough as is, it makes him not only a really good servant to use with buster supports, but it also makes him an insanely good arts looping servant, because they didn't really think about the fact that he has 10 hits on his NP on an AoE arts NP. So let's go ahead and talk about Emiya, starting off with his hits. And yeah, the first thing that I just mentioned are the hits on his NP, which are absolutely ludicrous. 10 hits on an NP that you can actually change to being arts is pretty much all you gotta say about this dude's hits, because, I mean, what do you want to talk about? It's like, oh, I mean, he's only got one hit on the buster card. It really doesn't matter. I mean, he's got 2 hits on the quick card with 7.9% star gen, but like, whoop-de-doo, if you want him to gen stars, keep his NP to being buster and let that second skill go off, and then this guy will drop all the stars you could ever want. Even without his NP changing to arts, I mean, he's got a triple arts deck, and they're all really strong arts cards with 3 hits apiece. NP gain is a bit on the lower side at 0.51%, but because of Emiya's original style of gameplay where he's supposed to massively buff up his crit star drop rate and turn his 10 hit NP into a star jetting machine, kind of like, say, Raiko or Iskandar, it pretty much just meant that anytime you had one of his arts cards, they were probably critting, because, again, also being an archer means that his natural star weight is insanely high, and he was just going to absorb all of them anyway, and then you just crit on all of his arts cards and be absolutely fine when it came to genning his NP. But really, all of these hits here really aren't all that important, because it's really the 10 hits on his NP that make the huge difference. That's the thing you really want to pay attention to. Although I guess I'd be a little bit remiss if I didn't talk about that 5-hit extra attack, that if you don't know, let me tell you, is a composite card that gens stars NP and does big boy damage. Although on Emiya, it's going to be a little bit on the lackluster side, because the dude's natural star gen and NP gain aren't really all that high, so the extra attack's not really going to pop off, but at the very least they didn't shaft him and they gave him a 5-hit extra attack, so you know, we do take those. Let's go ahead and move on over to Emiya's skill though, because as I've always been saying, the skills are what pay the bills with a lot of these servants, and Emiya's skills are absolutely insane. All of them are pretty broken, with maybe the exception of skill 1 over here, which is pretty modest by all standards considering how OP his other skills are. This one is just an evasion for 1 turn that also buffs his defense by 18% for 3 turns on a 6-turn cooldown. Now, while it's not super broken or anything, it's still nice that he has his own method of survivability, even though if you're pairing him with like double Merlin, you obviously have like the double illusion skill to keep yourself alive, and if you're pairing him with Castoria as an art servant, both her 3rd skill and NP are really good at keeping individual members of the party and the entire party alive. It's still nice when you have these individual buffs, because you could always get like buff removal or something along those lines, and being able to rely on like your own method of survivability to keep yourself alive is always really good. I mean, that 18% defense really isn't going to be coming in all that clutch, but it may come up sometimes if you're stacking defensive buffs with like Mash, Waver, Bedivere maybe, I don't know. But really, it's just nice as a survivability skill, and you're really only going to be using it for that. The second skill is where things start to get a little bit nutty, because Emiya over here gives himself 100% crit star drop rate, which, as I mentioned, he has a 10-hit NP, meaning you essentially turn that 10-hit NP into just an absolute star bomb machine, again, kind of like Iskandar Raiko, But then he also, for whatever reason, gives himself a 100% crit damage buff for 3 turns. Yeah, not like 50% like a lot of the other normal servants, you know, and not even just like, oh, 100%, but for 3 attacks. He just straight up gives himself 100% crit damage for 3 turns. Like, it's absolutely ludicrous. If you need like some method of comparison to like how strong that is, that's how strong Scotty's quick crit buff is, and that's how strong the crit buff that Merlin gives on hero creation is, and Emiya just gives it to himself for free, like no conditions or whatever, while also turning himself into a star bombing menace. Now here's the other crazy thing about this. This was already really good when he was a Buster servant, right? Because as you guys know, if you buff up a Buster card enough, it kind of turns into a star genning card as well, you know? But this is also the same level of crit star gen that Caskill gives on his skill buff, and the 100% is supposed to guarantee that arts cards can actually drop stars as well, because if you guys don't know, arts cards inherently have a star genning stat of 0, but when you buff it up by 100%, it literally gets to like the point where like each individual hit of an arts card is at least guaranteed to drop at least 1 star. And that's why Caskill is so good for art supports, you know, because, you know, he just guarantees that arts cards can drop stars at that point. Emiya still has the 10 hits on his arts NP while giving himself this. So he's not going to star bomb as hard, right? But he can still drop stars if you fire his NP while this is up. And that's why it's so insane, because if they just gave him like, oh, a 50% crit generation buff, right, while he had the Buster NP, it'd still be fine. But the fact that it's 100% means that even after it changes to being an arts NP, if you want to use him for that, he can still drop some stars. And it just makes him dummy insanely good. And we're not even done. We go to his 3rd skill. And this is the skill that kind of makes all the magic happen. Because not only is it a Omni card buff of 50% for 1 turn. And what that means is he basically is going to buff both his arts, Buster, and quick cards by 50% for 1 turn. So, you know, mana burst levels of strength. So whether you're using a Buster or Arts NP, those are going to bite. If you're going to be doing a 100% crit on the Arts card, well, he also gets this for that turn. If he wants to do a Buster crit, it's really going to sting for that turn. But the nutty part is that, as you can see right there at the very bottom, he can change his NP to being Arts or Buster for the next turn. Meaning what you can do with Emiya is that you can have him swap to being an Arts NP, bomb everybody, even gen some stars maybe if the 2nd skill is up, pretty much refund his NP, and then just fire the Buster NP next. It's a really, really strong 2-card punch, because even then, let's say you're doing like some kind of like weird boss fight, right, where you have like 1 node of enemies, 1 node of enemies, then you have the boss, right? What you can do is pop his 2nd skill, get the star gen going, get the crits going, change his NP to arts, pretty much kill everybody on wave 1, loop his NP, fire the Buster NP on wave 2, gen even more stars, because Buster cards at base value tend to be better at genning stars than arts cards do, get even more stars, and then just obliterate the enemy on wave 3 with massive crits. Now obviously you gotta get like good cards, you know, to do that, right? You gotta get lucky with your cards and everything, but I don't know, maybe just use like Lance or Artoria, have her come in and just shuffle some stuff around if you really are worried, right? Like, because then she also gives the crit damage buff. It just starts to get really crazy, right? Because of like how insane this actually made him. Because if you cut to his NP even, I mean, yeah, the 10 hits are like really, really nice there, but it's not like the effects on it are all that bad. Yes, it's really, really basic. And honestly, if they wanted, they could probably add something to this to kind of make it maybe a little bit better, but having that Pierce defense is honestly fine, because it actually made him really good for specific boss fights, like the Siegfried Nerofest boss, where he had like 99% defense or something. And so you could just bring Emiya and he would just bomb Siegfried as per usual, and it made him really good for stuff like that. It lets him be like choicely really good in specific boss fights. So should you summon for Emiya? Is this a servant you should be going for? I am like half tempted to tell people yes, because like what are really the other really strong arts AoE archers, right? Like you really don't have a whole lot of them floating around. You have Jean Archer, who is a limited servant, and if you don't have her, you just don't have her. Zenobia will be coming out in like a year and a half-ish, maybe a little bit more, and she's quite insane. As someone that's even just been using her at NP1 over on JP, I can attest that she's really good. but then you're kind of like running the gamble of not having an arts AoE archer for like the next year and a half. The only thing that I can say is that like if you already have like Berserker Musashi, or you're planning on rolling for like Avenger Kama next summer or Space Ishtar early on next year, you could probably roll without Emiya for now, but he's still a very, very good asset to have in your Chaldea, because even at NP1, his damage is still pretty good. Like, as you can see, even on the NP damage charts that I, should have shown when I was talking about the NPs, his damage isn't bad. Like, when you're in that, like, 20,000 range, that's kind of like you're just in really good, decent territory for, like, farming and, doing good damage as an AoE servant. And so it's like you don't even really need to invest that much into Emiya if you actually just want to use him. But if you want him to be like exceptional and you get like a couple extra copies, NP2, NP3, that guy will absolutely just clap cheeks against whatever he's fighting. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I think Emiya is absolutely worth summoning, but then again, on the NA version of the game, I have the dude NP5'd, and I absolutely do not regret it. Over on JP, I have the dude at like NP1, so I have a bit more of like a fairer assessment on that. And even then on JP, he's very, very strong. But again, I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Make sure you leave a like on the video and you subscribe for daily FGO content. I feel like I could just say like, oh yeah, I'm back, baby. But I'm like, I never left. I never stopped uploading while I was on vacation. But I feel a lot better uploading with like this new setup and like getting the whole new mic and everything. Shoutouts to the guy that definitely helped us out in getting this new setup. He didn't have to do it, but he was like, man, I'm tired of seeing this bum content. I'm gonna help my boy out. So huge shout out to my guy. I don't want to like actually say his name because I don't know if he wants to get like blasted out like this, but he knows who he is, right? You know who he is. If he comments and he's like, hey, that's me, I'll pin his comment as long as I see it. But yeah, with all that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace, late guys.